I don't know
come
who
on.
the best. I don't know who the best transfer is going to be.
Dude, come on. Bijan Robinson, Alabama. Let's do it. Oh. We'll give him 1 year of the workload. He misses out on, getting to the draft early.
Someone should transfer to Southern Miss so they finally have a quarterback.
That's funny. Yeah. Yep. Hey guys, welcome to another edition of our college football PrizePicks show. I'm your host, Jordan Vanek. If you're unfamiliar with PrizePicks, just know that they're a site where you get a bunch of player props. They offer the most college football props that I've seen out there. You can bet on 5 of them, 4 of them, 3 of them, 2 of them, and basically take over unders. If you hit them, say you pick 5 of them and you hit all 5, you'll 10x on your money. And if you're a first-time user, use code Awesemo to get $100, match up to $100 on your first deposit. This is one of the best sites out there. And if you're new to the show, subscribe, like. We have some awesome free content over at Awesemo. Week 11 player rankings for the NFL, the NBA, UFC pro plays, NHL player projections. Adam, ship my money, one of the best in the NBA. He has a deeper dive article that's free. Man has been killing it. And he even won in college football, thanks to my co-host, Matt Gajewski. Matt, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, my man. Happy for another week of college football. I'm excited to see how the playoff picture shakes out. You and I were talking about some funny transfer scenarios before the show. I think we'll get a lot of those in the coming weeks. There's already some, one we'll talk about today in particular that affects one of our props, like Joshua Moore for Texas announced his transfer. So there's always news in college football in this day and age. And there's a lot of interesting ways to capitalize on it, particularly with PrizePicks.
Yeah, no, this is it's been a fun week. Down here, I really wish my sportsbook would allow some college football player props for me to take advantage of, but they're not quite there yet. But let's get into it with your first pick, Phil Jurkovec. So happy he's finally healthy and being able to throw the ball. I was surprised to see his line so low at 227.5. I see that you like the over.
This is one I do like the over. And I think it comes down to they're a completely different team when he's on the field, not just from an efficiency perspective. We can talk about the efficiency too. He's averaging 185 yards in just 15 attempts, obviously because of the injury, depressing some of that sample. But going back last year, very efficient quarterback for them and far more efficient than Grossel, who they've been trotting out. And they also have a very different offensive philosophy under Jurkovec. Their plays per game goes up. Their pass rate goes up. Last year, they were passing the ball 53% of the time under Jurkovec, and that's been severely depressed under Grossel and the backups they have in this team. And that's before we even mentioned game environment. They're taking on Florida State with a middling 54.5 total here, but Florida State is not good on defense. They've allowed over 300 yards passing to back-to-back signal callers. I think there's a lot of ways for this to hit the over here. So I am on Jurkovec over 227.5 passing yards.
Yeah, no, I definitely like that. Surprised we don't have some Zay Flowers in here, but maybe we will get to him at some point. But going forward, my pick is Breece Hall, over 97.5 rushing yards. They're playing Oklahoma this week. If Iowa State wants to have a chance in this one, they're going to have to establish the run. Oklahoma has given up some big games to running backs this season. Abram Smith had 148 yards on 20 carries. Bijan had 137 on 20 carries. Not only that, but Baylor, TCU, and Texas all average over 4.5 yards per carry. Breece Hall is one of the best running backs in the country. If last year against them, he had over 27 yards in their first matchup when they won, and in their matchup where they lost, he had 78. I think Iowa State, coming off a bad loss, will bounce back against an Oklahoma team who we don't know what they're going to do with their quarterbacks, and they just kind of had one of the worst losses they've had this season against Baylor. I think Hall gets over 24 carries in this game, which results in him having over 97.5 rushing yards. How do you feel about this prop?
It's a good one. It's high, so there's some sticker shock, but he does project over 100. For me, it comes down to volume, even in games where, maybe Iowa State's down. They've been in a couple of those of late. I was happy to see the line move so drastically in their favor. This opened around a touchdown in favor of Oklahoma, and it's been hit hard on the Iowa State side. They're down to about a field goal in most spots, which suggests that they should keep this fairly close. Oklahoma is weaker against the pass, but we know Iowa State, given their ideal game script, they're going to try to run the ball with Breece. And even in games they've been down, they're basically not using a change of pace back. Over the last 4 weeks, they've only given 8 carries to backup running backs, whereas Breece has been over 18 in each of those. So they're just not using a backup. Every single opportunity goes to Breece. So if this stays close, you're going to see him over 20 carries.
Yeah, again, I think like focusing on how do these teams kind of operate is super important when finding college football props. Iowa State needs to get Breece Hall going in order to win this football game, which is why I think he will have over 100 yards rushing. I don't think Oklahoma's run defense is very good. When they've played some teams that actually run the ball fairly well, those running backs, again, have had some big games. But let's move on to one of my favorite running backs in college football. And, it's your turn to take us over on the week. TreVeyon Henderson over 92.5 rushing yards for Ohio State.
Yeah, I made sure to get to the run sheet before you this time, so you couldn't steal my prop. But Henderson, I mean, he's just an absolute monster, averaging over 7 yards per carry. But let's talk about some game environment stuff first. Ohio State is a 19-point favorite over Michigan State, who plays fairly decent run defense. But this game is still sitting with the 68.5 total overall. So we're expecting a lot of points to be scored on both sides. And then nearly 3 touchdowns is the favorite. That's a lot of positive game script for Ohio State. Henderson has been incredibly efficient, and when games are closer, they'll give him the full workload. Last week, 13 carries for Henderson, Mayan Williams 14. The score against Purdue, it's not actually reflective of how that game played out. Ohio State shot up to a monstrous lead, and then Purdue ended up chipping away at it throughout the rest of the game when it was completely out of hand. So a lot of that garbage time production, I'm not taking too much from. They pulled Henderson pretty early in that game, and he's still at over 90 yards rushing. You look at the 2 previous games, which are a little bit closer. Henderson outcarried Williams 28-3 and 21-1. So there's the efficiency, there's the game script, a really high total. And then if Michigan State can hang around in this, Henderson has upside for that monstrous workload. He should be projected over 100 yards here.
Yeah, and I believe once they were up by like 20 points, they had a few drives where like Henderson got the drive and didn't come out, and then Mayan got the drive and didn't come out. And on 2 of Henderson's drives, I believe Garrett Wilson took a 66-yard carry. And I believe they had another huge, big touchdown to Jackson Najiba. So, like, TreVeyon Henderson, I'm not, like, the dude is probably, like, right now with Bijan being out, he might be the best running back in college football. And when running backs are just of this caliber and this type of game environment, over 92 yards, I mentioned earlier to you, once it gets into, like, that winter time, you start to see, or deep into cold weather, you start to see these running backs start turning off some big games. I know Kenneth Walker's on the other side, but I think Ohio State in this line gets easily hit as long as he gets, 16 to 18 touches, he can hit this line.
Yeah, and I like what they did with him, especially like using Williams as a change of pace when the game is out of hand. Like they have no incentive to run Henderson into the ground. I mean, I hope they continue to do that in hopes that they like make the playoffs and can give one of these SEC contenders a good run. So I'm happy they're spelling him a little bit, and I think that's good for his efficiency. He did get banged up earlier in the year, but overall, if Michigan State can hang in the game, which Michigan State's a better offense than Purdue overall, they're a little more dynamic in terms of what they can do on the ground. Purdue basically just your pass only air raid team. I think they can hang with Ohio State and keep it close enough where Henderson does need a larger workload.
Yeah, I mean, I personally believe Ohio State offensively, obviously it depends a lot on Stroud, but like they have the talent to score 40 on any team. They have 3 of the best receivers in the country, and then along with TreVeyon Henderson. But moving on to another premier running back in college football, Leddie Brown, who hasn't been as good this year as he was in years past. His prop is another high one at 93.5 rushing yards, but I still like the over because this Texas run defense is awful. They're giving up over 5 yards a carry on the year. They've been 3 straight weeks of, I think, 5.4 yards a carry. Devin Neal, Kansas's running back, got 24 carries for 143 yards. Breece Hall, 136 yards on 19 carries. Abram Smith, 145 yards on 16 carries. These running backs have been running all over this Texas defense, and they're at home. They're favorited by 2.5 points. Leddie Brown, I believe, will get to the 23 carry mark because he's been taken out of game script quite a few times this year because West Virginia has been a pretty bad team, but they're favorited in this one. And over 93.5 rushing yards is something that I see him hitting. How do you feel about this one, Matt?
Yeah, it comes down to they've been really inefficient this year because their offensive line, they did return a lot of starters, but they just they didn't really have the good players to begin with. So in some of these tougher Big 12 matchups, and there's a lot of good run defenses in the Big 12. You can talk about Baylor, Oklahoma State, among others. So in some of these spots, he's struggled, and I think that's been a little bit predictable. A lot of his productions actually come through the air. But now he's in one of these rare matchups where we have a bad run defense on the other side that he can actually take advantage of. The workload has not been in question for Leddie at any point this year. He is seeing immense volume. So if we do see an uptick in any sort of efficiency, he should hit this over. It's a little bit risky. I'm surprised the prop didn't come in a little lower, to be honest with you, just based on like the season averages. But I still think it's one you can target.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm just on the fact that if you let a Kansas running back run for over 100 yards against you, if you lose to Kansas at home, there's, I'm sorry, that is just this. That's just the worst that you could possibly do. I mean, I again, Texas, we'll get to some of their props this weekend. It's just one of those games, man. You just can't lose to them at home against an environment like that. That's Kansas's first win in what? How many road games do they lose in a row? Like 40.
I don't know the number, crazy. But it's not good.
It's just something ridiculous. But moving forward, if you guys haven't heard all week, we've been preaching it. We have a promo for one of the greatest coaches in college basketball. It's Coach K. Use that promo code, get you a week of Awesemo Plus for $29.95. That's all the premium tools such as player projections, ownership, so much more. And if you're just into college basketball, because Matt has been killing it this year with him, those projections, use Coach K promo for just getting weekly access to the college football or college basketball player projections for just $5. That promo is valid till the end of tomorrow, so be sure to use it if you're missing out on that. It's a bad one to miss out. Matt is super efficient with getting these college basketball props out or player projections out there. I don't know how you do it, Matt, with all the stuff you got going on. I mean, these college basketball teams, don't know how to say half the names, but I know that you know what you're doing and you know how the usage works. So congrats on being able to do that niche sport. It's not for me, that's for you, but definitely take advantage of the promo. It's one to kill it. There's
PrizePicks has it too, man. Who knows, Jordan? Maybe after this football season, they'll let us continue the show with basketball. You never know.
That would be scary. I would have to learn a lot of names. I just know I went in and Bontaru, I don't know his name. I just know that he was one of the best recruits. I played him a lot in the first game. He was my favorite play of the game, and then he got hurt, but he still played pretty well. But anyways, Matt, I know, didn't someone win just recently, take down a GPP with your basketball projections or come close?
I don't know. Everything was overshadowed by Adam's win.
Yeah, Adam coming first, second, and third in the night slate is pretty nice, but it's okay, Adam. I mean, Adam will tell people to not follow you on Twitter at the same time, shout you out for, quote, knowing nothing about college football, but Matt's projections got me here. So love to see it. Let's move along. Matt, you like Will Shipley's over 67.5 rushing yards. I'm still shocked it's this low. What got you here? And tell me a little bit about it.
Yeah, a couple things here. Clemson, 4.5-point favorite over Wake, which might surprise little people, but it kind of just speaks to Wake Forest's level of competition throughout the year. Clemson's been a little bit better than that early season kind of sleepwalking they went through the beginning of their schedule with. And as 4.5-point favorites, they're facing one of the worst run defenses in college football, allowing nearly 210 yards per game. They got gashed by teams like Army. And we know Clemson has better players, better recruiting, better talent than that. They have the number one running back in the country recruit-wise in Will Shipley. Shipley did not play last week, and it was out of precaution. They faced UConn. They also didn't play Kobe Pace for the same reason. According to Dabo Sweeney, he was available in case of emergency, and I took that as in case they had a scare against UConn, but they did not, so they did not play Shipley. And earlier this season, we've seen him well over 20 carries as their bell cow back. It's been injuries that have hurt him. So I'm actually happy that they held him out against UConn, give him that extra week to hopefully heal up and play Wake Forest. And this is a meaningful game for Clemson. Like, the ACC is not out of hand yet. So they could potentially make a run here, depending on how some things shake out. I do think they are still competing. They're obviously not live for the playoff, but these are important games for them.
Yeah. I mean, you look at some of the rushing yards for opponents against Wake Forest. North Carolina had 6 yards a carry, a lot to dual threat Sam Howell nowadays. I don't know how he managed to turn that around, but hey, he's one of the better dual threats in college football. Duke had 4 yards a carry. Army at 6, Syracuse 6. list goes on and on. Wake Forest is not a very good run defense. And it's funny because like Army runs a triple option. Like, they're running every single play. They still couldn't figure out a way to stop it. And I remember they were on that slate that week, and I couldn't believe that they were on it. And I was very frustrated because I didn't play any Wake Forest players. So I got burned that week.
They scored 90 points in the game. I mean, it was
Yeah.
the GPP play of the century. I didn't play it either, so I definitely did not win that week. But it was like I think they eclipsed 90 points together.
Yeah.
But anyway, that just speaks to how bad their run defense is. And now instead of facing Army's triple option attack, they're facing 5-star Will Shipley.
Yeah. I mean, Army or Wake Forest game was 70-56. It was disgusting.
Oh, they went over 100 points. I forgot.
It was one of the highest scoring games ever. But moving along to one of my props of the week. I know me and you talked about it before the show. This is one that I am pairing together. I am not trying to play separately. So let's get started with Casey Thompson over 227.5 passing yards. They're 2.5-point underdogs on the road with a 56 over under. They are playing Leddie Brown in West Virginia, who I believe will be able to run against them. No Bijan Robinson. He's out for the season, and I would be surprised if he decides to play at all in a bowl game or anything like that. And with that, I believe that the Texas offense will have an uptick in passing attempts like they did last week against Kansas. And Sarkisian, again, I believe he will get the ball to his best player, and his best player is Xavier Worthy now that Bijan is out, which is why I like Xavier Worthy's prop of over 72.5 receiving yards. Jordan Whittington does return to this Texas offense, but Worthy is clear-cut the alpha in this room, and from what I've seen this year. And Joshua Moore exits the program, so you're going to have Jordan Washington on the outside. In last week's game against Kansas that went into overtime, Xavier Worthy saw 23 targets. He had 14 receptions, 3 touchdowns, a monstrous receiving game. And in the 4 games this year that he has gotten over 72.5 receiving yards, it coincides with Casey Thompson. He has thrown for over 227 passing yards. They're going to need to connect on a deep play. West Virginia's pass defense has been solid this year, but has moments where you don't know what's going on. I think with the uptick in touches and just the talent of Xavier Worthy, I'm pairing these two together. Matt, I believe you said you have a little bit of confidence in this because they're slightly over your projections.
Yeah, they're both over the projections. I don't know how much their pass rate changes. I think I have them pretty generously projected for around 46% pass rate. Some of that due to game script, which is projected to be negative here, which also helps them throwing. But ultimately, I do have this towards the over on both sides. I have Worthy at 75 yards. And a lot of that comes back to just they're getting Whittington back, who's the wide receiver one without him. Xavier Worthy's a freshman. So, I mean, those early season games, I think you're just dealing with a young kid in the program, a talented kid, but it's going to take some time. And we saw it take time. But since then, he's really emerged as the alpha in the offense. So I do think Worthy still works as the number one ahead of Whittington. It's just how much does Whittington siphon off of him? But either way, there's room for this prop to be even wider. I mean, if Whittington's limited, if for whatever reason, like he doesn't play as much as Joshua Moore did, they like Marcus Washington more now. There's just a lot of ways where Worthy could still hit this. And I'm in complete agreement with you on Casey Thompson. He projects about 10 yards over this prop for me. It's just a matter of how that receiving yardage is distributed. And one last thing, I think a lot of people view West Virginia as a really strong pass defense. They're actually 95th in passing yards allowed per attempt. They just haven't faced a ton of attempts. In some of the games where they've been down, teams have just run the ball on them. So they haven't actually allowed a ton of passing production, but it's because teams haven't thrown as much on them. Again, 95th in passing yards allowed per attempt.
Yeah, no, again, I really believe that if Worthy doesn't get there, I'm not certain Casey Thompson gets there. So it's definitely more of like the risky play. But I'm a fan of Casey Thompson, and I just think Steve Sarkisian's going to force feed Xavier Worthy because he is the best player on Texas right now, and Whittington will definitely get targets as well. I'm hoping to see a little shift in the offense considering that Bijan is out. Roquan Johnson is definitely a talented running back, but he's just not on the level of Bijan, which is something. Well, I mean, we'll see this weekend whether or not that philosophy changes. Well, let's get into one of your unders of the week, where ZeQuandre White, South Carolina's running back, under 60.5 rushing yards. Is this to do with the return of Kevin Harris?
Yeah, I mean, Kevin Harris has been playing. So I mean, it's not even a new thing. Like, I'm just confused why the prop is so high. Like, Auburn's a good run defense. They're certainly in the top 45 in yards per attempt. This projects to be negative game script for South Carolina. So how much can they run to begin with? And then, like, it's a three-way timeshare. Kevin Harris outcarried him 14-10 in the last game. They carried him 16-14 in the game prior. And that's not even considering Marshawn Lloyd is averaging 7 touches per game himself. Like, this is a three-way timeshare at best, a four-way timeshare at times when Juju McDowell siphons off a couple carries. Like, if ZeQuandre White averaging about 10 carries per game, like, what kind of efficiency does he need to eclipse this mark against the solid Auburn run defense? Like, he needs 6 yards per carry, which is, I guess, in the range of outcomes, but it would be an anomalous performance to me. Like, some of the rushing yardage he did have the big games were before Kevin Harris came back, but Kevin Harris has been the lead back since he returned.
Yeah, no, I that's why I said, I was like, I thought Kevin Harris was still due or out to injury. I haven't been paying too much attention to the South Carolina.
Why would you? I mean, South Carolina.
It's one of those. I mean, hey, this is why you're here. This is what you bring to the table, man. This is knowing all these injuries. But let's give some extra picks for some people that we didn't know if you're going to get to. To his little brother, you got over 249 passing yards. That's one of the props that I was surprised to see, to be honest. Tell me how or why you like it. What's your projection for him?
He just backdoors his way into 300 yards regardless of opponents. And it's because they throw the ball at such a high clip and they run such a fast offense. They're running 74 plays per game, which is easily in the top 30, and they're passing the ball 59% of the time. I think it makes sense considering they don't have a strong backfield nor the best offensive line. Right now, Tagovailoa, he has 39 attempts per game. He's averaging 309 yards, and he is going up against a fairly strong Michigan secondary, and we'll have to wait on some injuries. Michigan was down a starting corner last week. We haven't seen an injury update to my knowledge just yet, but this game is a fairly solid total, 57.5. And we know Michigan will keep pace a little bit too. A lot of people view them as this slow run heavy team, and that's true. They are very run heavy, but they don't play slow. They're averaging 72 plays per game themselves, which I think is on par with what they did last year. So this is definitely not a slow game. Michigan will play with pace, which suits this as well. So Tagovailoa, for me, he projects, I'll pull up the exact projection, but it's over around 280 yards. And I know that's well above his prop you can find on PrizePicks here.
Yeah. And I mean, going into the next one, Sam Hartman under 307.5 passing yards. I was shocked to see it so high. I know how good he's been this year, but Clemson's not like they're just a bad defense. Their offense just hasn't given their defense any help this year. I mean, that Georgia game week 1, like, if they don't throw the pick 6, they could easily win that game. And the whole season for both of these teams completely flip. And Sam Hartman under 307.5 passing yards. I'm guessing you probably have him projecting like the 270s, 280s.
Yeah, he's around 280, like almost right at 280. And he's been fantastic of late. He's basically been over 300 yards in 5 of the last 6 games. But you look at the opponents, it's Louisville, Syracuse, Army, Duke, North Carolina. He hasn't faced a poor defense really at all he hasn't faced a strong defense really at all this season. And even in the beginning of the year, like Florida State, Old Dominion, and Norfolk State. This is the hardest matchup that we've seen all year for Sam Hartman. And then you look at the game environment overall. Clemson, they're playing a little bit slower this year. And I think a lot of that just comes down to they don't have Trevor Lawrence under center at this point. So they kind of have to. The pass defense has been up and down at times. They've dealt with like some targetings and some injuries. But overall, this pass defense is top 12 in yards per attempt to opposing signal callers. And I mean, like, yards allowed, like, it's just 6.1, which is 11th fewest in the country. We'll frame it that way so people aren't confused. They're allowing the 11th fewest passing yards allowed per attempt to opposing teams. So while the yardage might be misleading, this team has been very efficient on defense from a per attempt perspective, which drops Hartman down here.
Yeah, no, that's definitely I agree. I was shocked to see it at 300. I almost put it on the sheet, but I just don't like unders. I'll be honest. I'll just say it the way it is.
I'm over here betting the unders.
Unders are the scary part of college football. I don't. It just bugs me. It's rooting. Oh, please don't throw for more yards. It's a scary sight. But I agree that Clemson. this man could go out there and have a 200-yard day, and I really wouldn't be that surprised because Clemson's defense is still really freaking good. They just haven't had the offense. Pairing Will Shipley in this actually makes a ton of sense because if Clemson's dominating the run game, the defense is probably being able to pin their ears back, get after Hartman, get some sacks, generate some turnovers, and just control the clock.
One last thing I didn't even bring up, Jacare Roberson got banged up last week. We don't know the update on his status, but he only played about 30% of the snaps. He's banged up right now. 2 targets, 30% of the snaps. His loss would be immense. And we don't have that information right now. If he were a miss, obviously I would like the under even more.
Yeah. And the last one we're getting to today, Jordan Travis over 39.5 rushing yards. I actually looked into his game log just as we were speaking about it. Brought his name up. I see that he's hit that in 3 of the last 4 games, and that's with taking sacks, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah, and one thing I really like about this is he's not just a scrambler. So they use him a lot on designed runs. Last week, 15 designed runs for Travis. And then you look at his sacks to scrambling ratio. He's been sacked 19 times this year, but he's also scrambled 34 times. So you break that down to a per game basis. You have maybe 2-3 sacks, but also 2-3 scrambles, and then upwards of 15 designed runs. For a prop this low, it seems pretty egregious to me. And then you look at the matchup here. They're only 1.5 point underdogs. So this game should not be out of hand. Florida State can continue to run with their run first approach. And Boston College has one glaring weakness on defense, and it's against the run. They're allowing 184 yards per game. And they've actually been pretty good at defending the pass, but the run has been an issue for them. Jordan Travis is a very mobile signal caller, and he is somebody they're going to use a lot on designed runs. So I like the over here. I was shocked this didn't come in around 50.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I didn't look too much into it. Again, just not being able to see every single one. I saw that you put it in the extra picks pile, which is nice to actually get to because I will be taking a bet onto that one. But again, guys, if you haven't downloaded PrizePicks already, you're really missing out. We have a promo going for it. Use code Awesemo and we'll match up to $100 in your first deposit. Again, you can pick anywhere from 2 to 5 players. It's a ton of props. You can win multitude of ways. If you pick 5 and you hit all 5, you 10x in your money. 4 to 5, you're still 2xing. Me and Matt have actually been on a roll in recent weeks. Hopefully that continues. And again, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, like the show. I appreciate it. And coming up next, we got NBA Deeper Dive with Dave and Adam. NBA Live Before Lock with Eric and Greg. And I believe you and Ben are getting back in the Friday night college football Live Before Lock or grind, aren't you?
We are tomorrow. If we are today, I didn't know about it.
I'm going
to check the one-stop shop right now, because if that is the case, looks like I have some work to do.
Nope, I lied. I misinterpreted. I thought.
All right, so you're thinking about next week, Jordan. Next week is the huge post-Thanksgiving slate. They've been running tickets to this enormous contest for a month now. So we're doing a live before lock before that. That is next Friday.
That's what I was missing. My bad, guys. Hopefully not giving you guys all the wrong information. But anyways, thanks for tuning in. I'll go win some money this weekend and go check out tomorrow's show with Ben and Matt, because I usually tune in, mess around in the chat, and have a good one, boys.